and welcome to the 15-Minute Book Club. This is the short-form podcast where an author gets 15 minutes to convince you that you cannot live without a copy of their new book in your life. Hello, Matt. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very warm because we're having summer today, I suppose, here in Sussex. So made the best of it so far by wandering to town. So yeah, all good here. And as always, we have a fabulous guest with us. And of course, if you'd like 15 extra minutes with our guest, join us on Patreon and you'll get the extra time bit where we go a little bit more into research and what's going on with them. And with this particular guest, there's quite a bit going on at the moment because, hello, sir, who the hell are you?
Hello, I'm James Holland and I am a historian of the Second World War. Although for this new book, The Visionaries, I have gone beyond my normal brief, which is exciting.
Yeah, exciting.
Yeah. Change of gear, I suppose. Or not really direction, is it?
Well,
the one that makes sense, I think.
I mean, I was just, it came about last summer because I was sort of thinking about the state of the world, and I was thinking about parallels, and I was thinking about, people say to you, history repeats itself. Well, actually, of course, history doesn't repeat itself because it can't possibly, because that was then and this is now and everything's different. But I think patterns of human behavior do. And so the analog study of history is incredibly useful to help you get through whatever travails are going on in the world at any one time. History is the compass that guides us to the present and helps us prepare for the future, I would argue. Fundamentally, because human nature hasn't really changed very much, I don't think. I mean, if you look at Shakespeare, it's full of love and hate and resentment and envy and kindness and laughter and all the rest of it, all the same emotions that we have today. So I think people are broadly the same, even though the world is obviously rapidly evolving and changing.
Right, let's start the timer because I'm actually going to be intrigued because I think when we had you on History Hack for the Sherwood Forces one, I think you gave us a 50. Forward French Rangers, beg your pardon.
Yeah, the Sherwood Forces.
No, I know. I think that's actually in the beginning of the book, isn't it? I think you gave us a 15-minute answer. So this is going to be interesting to see how we get on. Right. So James Holland, your 15 minutes on mid-century introduction to global economics begins now.
Whoever knew I'd be talking about economics, the man who
I know, right?
he rubbish with money.
Okay, well, let's start then by drawing the link, because obviously everyone knows you're a Second World War historian, but this does actually make sense, doesn't it? So when you went to your publisher and said, this is what I want to do now, how did you sell it to them?
This is what it looks like now, by the way. You've got proof, Matt. This is
Yeah, I've got the black and white version.
They went colour for the final bit.
Awesome.
Sorry, what?
How did you convince your publisher, James, that this book needed to be written?
Well, fortunately, I have a very good relationship with my publisher. It's a wonderful fellow called Bill Scott Carr. He's an amazing editor and publisher, and he didn't really take an awful lot of convincing, to be honest. I mean, Bill and I have been entwined in publishing for 20 years now. And how it works is that I'm fortunate enough that I can just go, I've got an idea, what do you think? And he goes, yeah, that sounds good. And off we go. And occasionally I have to do a kind of one-page brief, but that's literally about it. So he didn't require much convincing. And after I'd written my one-page brief, or maybe it was more like 8 pages, everyone else was on board. I think everyone could sort of see the kind of relevance of it. And it is a lesson for our times, and it is about the importance of history and why we should be using history to help us more in the present. So I think I think it struck a chord when I was talking to Bill, and I think when Bill was then pitching it to everyone else at Bantam Press, which is part of Transworld, which in turn is part of the behemoth that is Penguin Random House. I think everyone else could sort of see the value of it, even though it's sort of a little bit of a deviation from my normal kind of campaign history of the Second World War fare.
It's an interesting read. I finished it yesterday, and it is
like a winning endorsement, to be honest, Matt.
He has had it a while, don't you?
As you can see, I got the proof so long ago before your fancy color version came out, and so I've only finished it because economics are not my strong suit, James. But for this, you've had to sort of really sort of pull from different areas for it. What sort of approach did you take to it to get it together when we were starting to talk about big economic changes post the crash with Keynesian economics and things like that being thrust into the spotlight, whereas normally you get to talk about far more interesting things like tanks and battles?
Well, I would
stuff
dispute this, Matt. That's the whole point. I mean, whoever knew that Keynesian economics could be so interesting? They're absolutely fascinating, as I have discovered. Well, okay, so let me give you a little bit of context here. So the background to it was, I was thinking, gosh, isn't it interesting that after the First World War, there was obviously economic mayhem because of the cost of the war, which was then rapidly followed by the Spanish flu, which obviously, as we know, pandemics are expensive as well as fatal, or can be. So there was that. Then there was the Wall Street crash in 1929. Then, immediately after the Wall Street crash, the Americans then imposed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of May the 28th, which was signed by President Herbert Hoover on May the 28th, 1930, which prompted a global trade war. You're thinking, well, hang on a minute. There was a really, really kind of economically devastating series of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which crippled the economies in the West, and particularly, the United States and here in the UK. Then there was the 2008 financial crisis, sort of mirroring roughly kind of, the 1929 Wall Street crash. Then we had the pandemic. Now we've got Trump and his trade wars. There's a parallel here. And you start thinking about this and analyzing all this. And what you realize is that if you accept the premise that patterns of human behavior are repeated, if not history itself, then what was the response to the economic crises that followed in swift succession after, with these gaps in between, as we have recently experienced in the last 25 years? What was the response? Well, the response was a massive strain on democratic politics. And what you start to see is that when you have really major economic upheavals, you then have political upheavals in democracies. And you start to go to the fringes. You go to the fringes of the left, political left and the political right, and you have mayhem. And once you have political uncertainty combined with economic uncertainty, you're that much closer to war. And so here we are in 2026 with economic mayhem and downturns, political mayhem. And what is the result? Well, we've got a European war. We've had absolute mayhem in Gaza. Now we've had Iran. We've got Russia with its only decent troops left still on the border of the Baltic states, ready to test NATO at any moment. We're underprepared. It all sounds very familiar, doesn't it? And so you start to think, okay, well, that's all very interesting. But hang on a minute. Haven't we been enjoying progressive liberal democracy here in the West since 1945? Yes, we have. And how did they get around these huge economic crises then? Well, actually, it turns out there were some incredibly enlightened people who could see the big picture and take a long view and sorted it all out. And key to this are two really big figures. So the visionaries of the title are really first Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was president from 1933 to his death in April 1945, and Harry S. Truman, who succeeded him and then won a second term. But around them are a whole host of other interesting characters like John Maynard Keynes, the British economist, Harry Dexter White, who's an American economist, also a Soviet spy, interestingly enough. Obviously, Winston Churchill, can't get out without mentioning him. All sorts of other people, Averell Harriman and George Kennan and various other characters that sort of crop up along the way. Those are the visionaries. And what they created, what Roosevelt realized was that exactly this, that when you have dodgy economic situation or a financial crisis or a crash or whatever, democracy gets tested in quite an alarming way. And what you need to do in the future is you need to stop kind of talk of isolationism. That actually doesn't help. What you want to do is be internationalist and realize that the world is a smaller place and you all need to help one another, particularly if you're all democratic. And you need to restore confidence and you need to put in systems, regulation within banking and economic systems that will enable you in the future to not have these huge lurches in the way that you do at the end of the First World War and the end and you do in 1929 to 1930. and try and restore peace. And he comes at it with a completely different view, which is, first of all, we need to be good neighbors to our Latin American neighbors in Central America and Southern America, because America traditionally had been very strong-armed and bullish and kind of, if they didn't like a dictator, they would get rid of him and start meddling in politics in Mexico or Cuba or Costa Rica or wherever it might be, or further afield. And Roosevelt's going, no. What we need to do is we need to financially help these people, encourage them, get them to adopt democracy. Then they'll be richer, they'll be more progressive, then they'll do more trade and export, which we'll benefit from because we're the obvious market, and everyone will get richer, but we'll get richest of all. And of course, he's absolutely right. And then he starts thinking, well, hang on a minute, if I'm doing that to in our own Monroe Doctrine sphere of influence in the Americas, how about I then take this to the world? And that's basically the idea, which is where some of the principles that emerged in the Second World War come from. So it's got to be, it's not just economics, it's also got to be wrapped up in a sales pitch which is going to appeal to people. So which is where you get the concept for freedoms, which he announces at the beginning of January 1941 after he's just been elected for his third term. And this is freedom of want, i.e. we shouldn't all be poor. Freedom of fear, i.e. we should never go to war. Freedom of religion. So, we take all creeds. And freedom of speech, of course. So, those are the four freedoms, which then goes into
it's sounding quite appealing in today's world, isn't it?
It's sounding quite appealing, and you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, our esteemed current president, Donald J. Trump, could do quite well reading all this stuff. I mean, obviously, he's not going to read it because he doesn't read books and he doesn't give a damn. But if enough people do read about this stuff and remember, we're getting to a critical point, aren't we, where the era of the Second World War is slipping through the generations. It's 80 years on. And those who fought through it are very few and far between these days. And we've come all a little bit complacent. We take everything for granted, and we've forgotten this stuff. And we've forgotten that democracy is worth fighting for, and it's worth working for, and it's worth grafting for. And you have to realize that it's a two-way thing between the citizens and the state. And you also have to remind people of what can happen if it all goes horribly wrong. And so the lessons are all there, and I think it's a lesson that's worth knowing about. So the whole point about the book was to show what had happened, how we got into the 1930s and the problems of the 1930s, how Roosevelt got around it. I mean, in 1944 there was a Bretton Woods conference, for example, attended by 730 plus delegates from 44 different nations around the world, including, by the way, Ethiopia and Iran, who went to Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, and they had a financial conference to say, okay, so what are we going to do when the war's over? How are we going to deal with all this stuff? And it was absolutely amazing, because out of this emerged the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, which was there to ensure that no single country would have a kind of catastrophic lurch economically, that you could bail them out in a crisis. It's a really, really enlightened idea. This is happening in July 1944 at the height of the Normandy campaign and Operation Bagration on the Eastern Front and so on and so forth. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing to think that's going on. And then after the war, you have President Truman, who takes over from Roosevelt, coming up with the Truman Doctrine, which is this notion that America, as the richest, most successful nation in the world, should financially bail out those who don't want to be under oppression, don't want to be behind the Iron Curtain of communism, but actually want to live as free, democratic peoples. And so they bail out, first of all, they bail out Greece, and then they bail out Turkey, and then they start bailing some of the people that had lost in the Second World War. So, this is the first time ever in history that the victors in a war have financially bailed out the vanquished. Japan, Italy, West Germany, etc. It is absolutely off the radar, cool and amazing, and completely new when it happens. And actually, it is Truman's idea, although it has General George Marshall's name, who's the Secretary of State by that point, has his name because Truman thinks that would be more palatable for everyone, because Marshall is seen as this sort of neutral, apolitical kind of sage, the guy who steered America through the Second World War. Everyone respects him, all the rest of it. And some of Truman's aides are going, but Mr. President, it's your idea. You should get the credit. And he goes, I'm not doing this for credit. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. I mean, can you imagine Trump saying anything like that? I mean, so it's a reminder that America had some really, really amazing leaders and really, really amazing people. And there is a different way to this sort of narcissistic, hyper-masculine, kind of alpha male, egocentric, maniacal, unhinged worldview. There is a better way. and that's what got us out of the mire in the Second World War, and what has given us the 80 years of peace we've all been enjoying ever since, here in the West, I should say.
It's about time for the buzzer, isn't it?
Actually,
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just do the buzzer. And there we go. And you got 2 minutes.
So we basically, at this point, James, what we usually do is throw a 1-star review at you so we can laugh at the person that left it, because they're always ridiculous. They're always like, the cover was bent, or they're like, this book was miserable. And it's like, well, you put a war book. I don't know what you expected. But rarely do we get the chance to laugh at an entire government, because rather than just leave you a crappy review and move on with their lives, the Russian government made a list and put your name on it, didn't they?
Yeah, they did last summer. Yeah, there was a list of, I think, 20 odd people who were sanctioned. James Holland, historian.
Who knew that you were that important?
Not me, that's for sure. I mean, it's very unnerving. And I have to say, in this book, there is a whole chapter absolutely destroying the notions that the Russians were good in the Second World War. I mean, there were lots of incredibly brave people who were fighting for the Soviet Union, and make no mistake, their sacrifices were absolutely extraordinary, off the radar. But I would argue that a large proportion of those deaths, and let's face it, it's about 26 million, were avoidable, and a large part due to the grotesque incompetence of the Soviet leadership. So that hasn't won me a huge number of friends in the Kremlin, or
It's ridiculous.
It's very unnerving to be sanctioned. I'm not going to lie. I mean, like within 72 hours, 4 things quite badly had gone wrong. I sort of my computer was hacked, and then the Wi-Fi went.
Didn't it all happen in the middle of Chalk as well?
The sports hall in Cheshire.
Yeah. Didn't a load of stuff crash as well when you were at Chalk? Like, obviously, a totally stress-free period for you. Oh, okay.
I think that was Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a field in the middle of nowhere. What do you expect?
Yeah, I know.
Which is
like, but anyway,
Time's up.
There we go.
Buy your tickets, people. Chalk is happening in 3 weeks' time.
And for someone who's been lucky enough to spend some time in the green room at Chalk, it does actually have pretty good Wi-Fi in the green room.
It does have Wi-Fi for a long time.
Yeah. No. Thank you.
It's going to be fun.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Holland. Do you want to tell everybody once again what your new book is called?
Yes, it's called The Visionaries. I always forget the subtitle. The Visionaries. The Making of the Post-World War II Order in the West. It's a real kind of rolls off the tongue.
And available in colour as well. So
Brilliant.
Super
version. Then you can get a free proof copy. But if you want the colour, you have to pay for it, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's the colouring's expensive these days. So, right, you're going to stick around for a bit of Patreon extra time, but you do have the 2 festivals coming up. So we've got Chalk in June, and then We Have Ways as well. Do you want to give them a quick plug as well?
Yes, please. Yeah, I mean, Chalk it's totally amazing and fun, and it's all history, not just Second World War. And there's tons and tons going on. We have a truly unique lineup of people coming to talk and to perform and to do amazing things. So there's workshops and living history. There's music and opera and all sorts of stuff, and a film tent. But there is also just the most amazing talks program of people from all around the world coming here, and some really, really very special people, including the former head of the opposition in Venezuela, who is just Leopoldo Lopez, who's just absolutely the most charismatic person I've ever met. So he's coming, and various others, and stellar names like Mary Beard and whatever. Anyway, it's all going to be great. So come to that. And then We Have Ways Fest. If the Second World War is your bag, then this is very much for you. It's also talks and panels and discussions, but it's also ENSA review shows, and it's also serious amounts of hardware.
And firing a massive gun every night as well, which is like,
which is always
frankly,
fun.
that's enough for me. I'd go just to watch that go off every evening. So
Yeah, you and me the same. Yeah. So there's tanks, there's planes. I think we're going to have a spring back this year. It's
cool.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So links will be in the description for all of those good things, including this in color, available from our bookshop.org, where you can support James, support us, support independent bookshops, and not guys who build rockets that look like willies, which is always fun. So until next time, everybody, see you then. And if you're one of our Patreon supporters, we'll see you in a second. Bye-bye.
Cheerio.
James Holland's The Visionaries, the making of the post-World War II order in the West, is out in the UK on the 7th of May, and it's out in the States on the 26th of May. You can pre-order the book via our bookshop here in the UK and the US via the affiliate links in the description below.